My name is Corporal Leo Vance, and I want to tell you about the day my perfect shot turned into a complete failure, and my greatest salvation. It was September 1944. The bocage was behind us, and we were fighting our way slowly toward the German border. We were liberating one small French town after another. They were all pretty much the same. An old church in the center, a market square, narrow streets, and in every one of them the Germans were waiting. They had no illusions about victory anymore, but they fought with the fury of doomed men. They turned every house into a fortress, every attic into a sniper's perch. Our platoon was ordered to clear a town called Bory-la-Forêt. The key was the central square. Whoever controlled the square controlled the town. We went in at dawn, and at first it was quiet, too quiet. We moved along the walls of the houses, checking every doorway, every window, and then we reached the square. It was empty, a fountain in the middle, a few overturned market stalls, and silence. And then death struck from above. The dry, sharp crack of a sniper rifle echoed across the square. Private Simmons, walking ahead of me, collapsed onto the cobblestones without a sound. We immediately dove for cover, some behind the fountain, others behind the stalls. A second shot. The bullet struck sparks from the stone, an inch from the lieutenant's head. A sniper, and he was in the best possible spot you could imagine, the bell tower of the old church that loomed over the square. He had a perfect field of fire. He had us pinned down like bugs under glass. We were trapped. Any attempt to change position or fall back was met with a precise shot. Our radio man tried to contact HQ, but a bullet smashed the radio on his back, deafening him and turning the expensive equipment into a pile of junk. We couldn't advance, couldn't retreat. All we could do was lie there and wait for this sniper to pick us off one by one. I was the platoon's designated marksman. I had an M1903 Springfield with a scope. It was my job to deal with guys like him. The lieutenant crawled over to me, hugging the ground. "Vance, you got eyes on him?" "Negative, sir," I hissed back. "He's behind the stonework, firing through a slit. All I can see is the muzzle flash." "Can you get him?" It wasn't a question. It was an order. "Give me 5 minutes," I said. I found a position behind an overturned cart. It was lousy cover, but it gave me the angle I needed. I set up my rifle, adjusted the scope, and I began to wait. It was a duel, a game of patience. I knew he was waiting too, waiting for me to stick my head out. But I wasn't going to stick my head out. I was going to catch him making a mistake. 10 minutes passed. 20. Sweat was stinging my eyes. My muscles ached. But I didn't move. And then he made his mistake. He probably figured we were all dead or had pulled back. For a single moment, a split second, his silhouette appeared in the opening of the bell tower as he shifted position. It was enough. I caught him in my crosshairs. I could see his helmet, his shoulder. I took a deep breath, held it. The world narrowed to a single point again. I squeezed the trigger smoothly. The shot was clean and crisp. I knew it was a hit. I saw the figure in the bell tower jolt and start to fall. "Target down," I yelled to the lieutenant. Cheers went up from the platoon. We'd won, but we were wrong. As he fell, the German sniper's body tumbled not back into the bell tower, but out. It crashed through the rotten railing and plunged 60 feet to the ground below. And it was heading straight for a German Opel truck parked by the church. We didn't know what was in that truck, but judging by what happened next, it was ammunition. A lot of ammunition. The body hit the canvas top with a dull thud. A second later, the square vanished in a blinding flash of white fire. I didn't hear the explosion. I felt it. The shockwave was like a solid wall. It tore me from the ground and slammed my back against the stone wall of the house behind me. My rifle was ripped from my hands. The last thing I remembered was debris flying everywhere, the heat that seared my face, and a deafening roar that felt like it was tearing the very fabric of the universe apart. That shot was supposed to kill one enemy and end the fight. Instead, it nearly killed all of us, and was the beginning of my own personal hell. Everything went black. I woke up in a world without sound. Or rather, there was a sound, but it was just one. A high, continuous ringing in my ears that drowned out everything else. I was lying on my side, on something sharp and uncomfortable. The acrid smell of burnt metal, rubber, and something else, something sweet that my brain refused to identify, filled my nostrils. I opened my eyes. Everything was smoke. Thick, black, oily smoke was pouring from where the truck had been just a few minutes before. All that was left was a twisted, smoldering frame. The square was unrecognizable. The fountain was shattered, the cobblestones littered with chunks of stone, wood, and metal. The pain came later. First, a dull ache in my back where I'd hit the wall, and then a sharp, cutting pain in my left leg. I looked down. A jagged piece of shrapnel, like a feather from a giant metal bird, had punched through my fatigues just below the knee. It was sticking out of my flesh, a dark stain slowly spreading around it. I tried to move, and a flash of pain made me hiss. I was wounded. Badly. I looked around for my guys. The lieutenant? Rizzo? Anyone? But I couldn't see anyone. The smoke was too thick. I was lying behind what was left of the same cart that had been my cover. Now it was just a pile of charred planks. I was alone. Deafened, wounded, and alone in the middle of a ruined square. And then I heard them. Cutting through the ringing in my ears were voices. Guttural, sharp. Germans. The explosion had apparently been a signal for them. Figuring we were all dead or disorganized, they had launched a counterattack. 3 of them ran out of an alley on the far side of the square. They were moving fast, in short rushes, their submachine guns at the ready. Panic hit my chest like an ice-cold hammer. My rifle. Where was my Springfield? I felt around on the ground. It was gone. I was unarmed. I tried to crawl away, but my leg exploded with so much pain I almost blacked out again. I was trapped. One of the Germans spotted me. He yelled something to his comrades and raised his MP-40. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the end. I could see my death. There it was, 20 yards away. A burst of fire would come, and it would all be over. But the burst never came. I risked opening my eyes. The German had lowered his weapon. He was looking at me. Then he said something to his buddies, and all 3 of them laughed. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the meaning. They didn't see me as a threat. To them, I wasn't a soldier. I was just another dying American. Crippled, helpless, bleeding out on the cobblestones. Why waste the bullets? One of them waved his hand, and they ran on, toward the alley our platoon had come from. They were going to finish off the others. And they were leaving me to die. That thought, they were leaving me to die, hit me like a slap in the face. They didn't kill me because they already considered me dead. Their contempt, their certainty of my imminent demise, ignited something in me. It wasn't rage. It was a cold, stubborn anger. I'm not dead yet, you bastards. I whispered through clenched teeth. And in that moment, lying in the dust in my own blood, I made a decision. If they think I'm dead, fine. I won't disappoint them. I forced my muscles to relax. I stopped fighting the pain and just let it wash over me. I splayed my arms out, as if I'd been thrown into that position by the blast. I let my mouth hang open and stared up at the smoke-filled sky with a vacant, lifeless gaze. I stopped being Corporal Leo Vance. I became a corpse. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, lying perfectly still when every nerve ending is screaming in agony, ignoring the flies that were already starting to land on my face. But I lay there, and I listened. The firefight in the alley where my guys were hiding intensified. I could hear the familiar crack of our Garans and the answering sharper bursts of German submachine guns. My friends were alive. They were in the fight. But I knew they were at a disadvantage. The Germans were coming at them from the flank. 2 more Germans ran past me. One of them kicked my boot as he ran by, checking. I didn't flinch. I was dead. He grunted something and kept running. I lay there and I thought, what could I do? I was wounded, unarmed. But I was here, in the square, between the 2 groups. I could see things my friends couldn't. I started to look around, moving only my eyes. My gaze scanned the wreckage, and then I saw it. It was lying just a few feet away from me, half buried in rubble. My beauty. My Springfield. The blast had thrown it almost to the fountain, but it was intact. I could even see the scope wasn't broken, and next to it was an ammo pouch, torn from the belt of the dead Simmons. A plan began to form in my head. A plan as crazy and desperate as my situation. The Germans were focused on the fight in the alley. They weren't expecting an attack from their rear. They weren't expecting a corpse to suddenly resurrect. But to get to the rifle, I had to crawl about 10 feet. 10 feet of open, exposed ground. With my leg, it was almost impossible. Any movement could draw attention. And there was, I now noticed, another German in the square. He wasn't in the fight. He was sitting behind the broken fountain, his back to me, and he appeared to be a spotter or radioman. If he turned around, I had to wait for the perfect moment. I lay there, playing dead, listening to the symphony of the battle, trying to catch its rhythm. A burst from our BAR, return fire, a short pause, and then I heard the sound that was my chance. It was the distinct thump, thump, thump of a German mortar firing from somewhere behind the buildings. That meant 2 things. First, my guys were in deep trouble now. Second, that noise was my perfect cover. The moment the first mortar round screamed down and exploded in the alley, I started to move. I didn't crawl. I slithered, like a wounded snake, pushing with my one good leg in my hands, dragging my mangled left leg behind me. Every inch was an agony that sent sparks flashing in my eyes. I didn't look at the German behind the fountain. I looked only at my rifle. It was my salvation, my only chance. I made it. My fingers touched the cold wood of the stock. So familiar, so right. I pulled it toward me. Then I slid over to the ammo pouch. My hands trembled as I pulled out a clip. 5 rounds. Only 5. But in skilled hands it could be enough. I loaded the rifle, trying to make as little noise as possible. The bolt clicked home softly, almost intimately. Now, I was a soldier again. I was a dead soldier with a loaded sniper rifle, lying behind a pile of rubble, waiting for the moment to strike. I lay behind my barricade of broken stone and charred wood, and the world came back into focus. The pain in my leg hadn't gone away. It was a white-hot nail driven into the bone, but I could control it now. I pushed it to the back of my mind. The priority wasn't me. The priority was the fight in that alley, and my guys who were desperately holding on. I carefully peered around my cover. The German spotter was still behind the fountain, his back to me, yelling into a field radio, calling in the mortar fire. He was the perfect first target. An easy one. But I knew he wasn't the main threat. The main threat was the assault team pinning my platoon down. If I took out the spotter, the mortars would stop, but the assault team would still finish off my friends. No, I had to change the equation over there in the alley. From my position, I couldn't see into the alley itself, but I could see the rooftops of the buildings that formed it. They were old two-story buildings with tile roofs, and I noticed something important. On the roof of the building on the right, directly above my guy's position, was an attic hatch, and next to it lay a German machine gunner with an MG-42. He wasn't firing yet. He was waiting. He was waiting for the mortar barrage to force my guys to break cover, to run out into the open, and then he would turn that narrow alley into a meat grinder. It was a classic ambush tactic. He was their ace in the hole. And they didn't know that I could see him. He was a difficult target. A chimney stack obscured most of his body. I could only see his helmet and a sliver of his shoulder when he moved. The range was about 150 yards. With my old but reliable Springfield, it was a makeable shot. But I had no room for error. Only 5 rounds. Every one had to count. I pressed my cheek to the stock. I put the crosshairs on the chimney, and I waited. I wasn't aiming at the gunner. I was aiming at the spot next to him. I was waiting for him to move, to peek out again. It was the same duel I'd had with the first sniper, only this time the stakes were infinitely higher. A mortar round exploded very close to my guy's position. I heard screams, and in that moment, the German machine gunner couldn't resist. He raised himself up to get a better view of the result, to pick his moment to open up. That second was all I needed. I smoothly traversed the barrel, caught his helmet in the crosshairs, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. The shot was lost in the din of battle, but I saw the German helmet jerk back as if hit by a hammer. The body slumped onto the tiles and slowly slid down, snagging on the rain gutter. First one down. The threat from the roof was gone. Now for the spotter. He obviously hadn't noticed a thing. He was still yelling into his radio. I quickly shifted my aim to him. His back was to me. It was the easiest shot of my life. I fired. He just slumped sideways like a sack of potatoes and went still. The mortar fire stopped almost immediately. I had 3 rounds left. The shooting in the alley hadn't let up. I knew that even without the support from the roof and the mortars, the Germans still had the numbers. I needed to create chaos, to make them believe they were the ones in a trap. My gaze fell on a second alley that opened onto the square, to the left of the one where the fight was. It was empty, but I could see, at its far end, Germans bringing up crates of ammunition, preparing to press the attack. An officer was there giving orders. He was the third target. Take out the commander, and you sow panic. I took aim. He was standing half-turned to me, pointing. I fired. The officer clutched his chest and collapsed. The soldiers around him hesitated for a moment, looking around, trying to figure out where death had come from. They looked everywhere but at the square, not at the dead American. 2 rounds. The firing in the main alley began to slacken. It seemed the Germans, having lost their commander and support, were starting to waver, and at that moment, my guys, sensing the pressure ease, counterattacked. I heard a battle cry and saw 3 of my friends burst from around the corner, firing as they came. But directly in front of them, a German jumped out of a doorway with a submachine gun, ready to cut them all down. I had no time to aim. I just shouldered the rifle and fired from the hip in his direction. I missed. The bullet slammed into the wall next to him, but it was enough. The German instinctively turned toward the sound of the shot, toward the new, unexpected threat. That split second saved my guys. They had time to react and riddled him with lead. 1 round left. I saw the Germans begin to fall back. The fight was almost won, but one of them, as he retreated, took cover behind an overturned market stall and started laying down covering fire for his comrades. He was keeping my guys' heads down. I aimed one last time. I could only see the edge of his helmet over the top of the stall. I took a deep breath. I remembered my first shot at the sniper, the one that had started all this chaos. That shot had been perfect. This one had to be too. I squeezed the trigger. Click. The rifle didn't fire. I lowered it and looked at the bolt. Empty. I'd miscounted in the heat of battle. I had already used all 5 rounds. I was unarmed again. The German behind the stall kept firing, and then I did the last crazy thing of the day. I grabbed my empty rifle, raised myself up over my cover, and screamed at the top of my lungs, "Hey, Kraut! Choke on it!" He turned. He saw me, the bloody but very much alive dead man who had somehow gotten behind his lines. His eyes went wide with shock. That moment of hesitation was all the lieutenant needed. He flanked the stall from the other side and emptied his Colt into the German. Silence fell over the square. A real silence. The fight was over. When my guys ran over to me, they looked at me like I was a ghost. They thought I'd been killed in the explosion. The lieutenant took one look at my leg, shook his head, and said, "Vance, I don't know whether to pray for you or court-martial you for destroying a German supply truck, but either way, you just saved the entire platoon." I was sent to a hospital, and then home. My war ended in that square. I often think about that day, about the chain of accidents. My shot, which was meant to kill one enemy, caused an explosion that nearly killed me. But that same explosion made the Germans believe I was dead, and that belief gave me the chance to strike a blow no one saw coming. That shot didn't kill the enemy the way I'd planned, but it saved me and my friends in the strangest, most terrible way imaginable. War is a strange thing. Sometimes your biggest failure turns into your greatest victory.